Hello, everybody. Welcome to Perspectives. Today, we got a real expert in here, and you're going to really like what he has to say. We're talking to Dr. Kenneth Hicks, Professor of History and Political Science on campus at Rogers State University. Welcome, Dr. Hicks.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. Oh, where do we start?
I'll follow your lead.
Too close to call. We're hearing this every hour on the hour. Is it really?
It may be. The problem is the only way we would know it would be if we really could understand that polling is actually correct or not. And polling has been wildly kind of volatile over the last several cycles. There's been a consistent tendency both in 2016 and 2020 to somewhat undercount the number of Trump voters that are finding their way into polls. Pollsters are having difficulty controlling for that, and so, all the polls are basically showing something, a variance between, 2 points. That all the polls, and especially the battleground polls, because again, the national polls are irrelevant. What matters are the state polls, and state polls are widely, of widely varying quality.
It used to be a universal acceptance of plus or minus 5 or 6%. And that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, yeah, and the problem is that the race appears to be lying within the margin of error. And so polls don't help you in close races. That's what pollsters will tell you. They're really good at telling you if someone's going to win by a lot.
Yeah.
They're not so good at telling you if the race is going to end up being, 51, to 49. And so that's really the challenge. Because, in a typical race, it could be 51-49. It could be 53 to 47. That is the problem. And a 53, or 52 to 48 race, which is, again, would typically be within the margin of error, would be a decisive win, but it still won't reveal itself within a typical poll.
I'm old enough. I've been to a couple of goat ropings, and I've done a few things in my life, and I've never seen so much rage and anger going into an election as I have this one. What's behind it?
The roots of partisan polarization can go all, you can basically say it goes all the way back to the Civil War, but certainly it begins really manifesting itself in the 1960s with a variety of enormous cultural events. The civil rights movement, the environmental movement, and combined with the Vietnam War protests, really began to produce cultural fissures within American politics that politicians have been very effective at exploiting. And so now we have a politics of, the typical partisan, deal, which is addition, right? In electoral politics, it's typically a two-party race. So you win by addition. You win by appealing to voters. But increasingly, you can also win by subtraction. You can win by depressing the vote, either through voter suppression or alternatively, just by turning off voters. Voters can be so jaded that they simply decide not to vote.
I almost want to say that's what we're seeing in Georgia, but the lines to vote in Georgia are incredibly long. And yet there's a feeling there that everything's been done to prevent the Democrats from reaching the polls.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why a lot of voters are voting early. Part of the reason why black voters in the South go to the polls en masse is the history of voter intimidation. It's harder to intimidate, 200 people showing up at the same time to cast a ballot. That's what souls to the polls was all about. They would go to church, then they would go to vote. Collectively, because they needed that sense of collective protection. But when you vote early, it's, I think the perception is it's harder to suppress people when they are voting early.
Personal question.
Yes.
Do you feel as though the Republic is threatened at this point with its very existence?
Yeah. Up to a point, yes. I'm not sure how I would estimate the degree of threat, but I honestly believe that the nature of this campaign, there are some deeply authoritarian undertones that would suggest that basic institutions could be subverted. And a constitution is predicated. First there are principles and rules, but almost equally important are institutions that again routinize politics and that compel compromise and rule of law. Rule of law is truly being challenged in ways that, again, when Richard Nixon lost, he actually presided over his defeat as vice president, and it never occurred to him to attempt to subvert the election, because the norms, which is another important aspect of any kind of constitutional regime, the norms, it didn't even occur to him. When Bob Woodward says that Donald Trump is worse than Nixon, that's really what he means. Trump has no constraint over his personal ambition, where even Nixon, who was for many years the archetype of the unprincipled, man, unshackled, whose ambitions were basically unshackled, he laps Trump in that regard.
Did you see the Trump rally the other night?
I did.
Where he, all of a sudden, it was supposed to be a question and answer session.
Yes.
And he ended up having them play music over and over
for 39
and over again.
minutes. Yes, for 39 minutes. And what it reflects is his genuine disgust with having to answer questions. He has canceled numerous interviews now simply because his campaign is saying, if you do anything to fact check him, we're canceling the interview. And any principled journalistic outfit is going to say, if somebody says something that is factually untrue on air, even Fox News is getting leery about that after the Dominion lawsuit and the $787 million, judgment they agreed to. So, again, you have to gird yourself against someone going out and, for example, he basically said that he used Adam Schiff as an illustration of the type of people that he would like to see suppressed in the aftermath of the election. He thinks he called people like Adam Schiff the enemy within on multiple occasions.
To have a man of his alleged stature say that after I'm elected, I might bring in the army to go after people I consider to be subversive and people that don't like me. Where does that come from?
It comes from his instincts. He simply will not brook dissent. After the attempted assassination in July, again, there was this moment where everybody said, well, he will be a unifier now. He survived and he will be a kinder, gentler Donald Trump. That only lasted, I would say, it didn't even make it through the convention.
Well, he did say, though, that God spared him for a reason.
I mean, I don't want to really discuss that aspect of it. I mean, let me put it this way. Nobody wants an American politician to be assassinated. That is aberrant to our culture. Unfortunately, it has happened, and it tends to happen in bunches. You remember 1968, when we had both Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy Jr. assassinated in the same year. It really portends profound political unrest when you see those kinds of events happening. And so, I don't think anyone in their right mind would want to see that occur. If you are an opponent of Donald Trump, you want him to lose fairly, to be seen losing, and to accept the outcome of the election. That's what we need to see. Again, we need an electoral outcome that upholds the rule of law.
Can he pardon himself if he's elected?
I don't believe he can.
I couldn't find anything in the Constitution to reflect that. Even the articles, it's just not there.
It's never happened, first of all, and obviously, the Article 2 grants to the president the power to issue pardons and reprieves. That question has arisen at various times. I don't even think Nixon really considered it. It seemed to be something that Trump was bandying about, but I don't believe his legal counsel agreed with the premise that you could pardon yourself. I think, again, that reflects a sense in which the president is above the law, which up until very recently, I think most scholars of American jurisprudence rejected.
I don't think anyone could deny that the United States has a problem with the border and Mexico. How we solve it, what we do, how we fix it, I'm no expert. I can't solve it. I can tell you, however, that the lies that I heard from Trump's running mate, that they're eating dogs and cats, I was astounded.
Yeah, that's what was happening in Springfield, Ohio, where he was basically responding to rumors that were subsequently debunked and that they have persisted in, that a large number of, again, Springfield is a Rust Belt town that was struggling economically. A large number of Haitians were brought in, and that they've revitalized that town compared to other towns, in that part of Ohio. There are challenges that come with bringing 15,000 people into a community, many of whom don't speak English. Those are challenges that can be met with resources, rather than what Trump is suggesting, which is these people are in the country legally, and he's talking about sending them back, deporting them, which again would probably be a violation of the law.
And the offshoot laws to that, if their children are born in this country, doesn't that make them an American citizen?
Under the 14th Amendment, they are natural-born citizens.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more from Dr. Hicks right after this. And we're back talking with Dr. Kenneth Hicks, Professor of History and Political Science at Rogers State University. I heard a really prominent defense attorney say once, there's no defense for the truth. Yet we're seeing the truth bent and broken and bandaged and on crutches, and in some cases in a wheelchair. There's been a link up that I find intriguing in another profession. Step out of politics for a moment and into the field of predicting the weather. Meteorologists around the United States are reporting death threats. And it all stems from the Honorable Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said that the Democrats control space lasers that can force bad weather into certain key Republican areas.
Yes.
Now, the meteorologists are saying that's foolishness, that's hogwash. And the ones that say that are the ones getting the death threats.
There was a really good story, I can't remember if it was in the Times or the Washington Post, about a guy that was hired to work at a station in Iowa. And they hired him because he was a climate scientist who basically accepted the idea and wanted to teach about the challenges related to climate change. And he was accepted for a little while, and then, climate change became more and more controversial. And it got to the point where he left that station. And a lot of it, again, has to do with some basic challenges related to our politics, which is people don't always feel bound to the truth. There is this tribalism within our politics right now that is extra rational and deeply emotional. And it causes people to say, well, if you believe that, you're on the other team. And if you're on the other team, there's something wrong with you. And that is really hard to overcome because, again, these are not based on appeals to facts or appeals to reason. These are simply, based in visceral tribalism.
Is there anyone holding Marjorie Taylor Greene to some sort of accountability?
No. Simply put, she is a member of the House of Representatives. The speech and debate clause is very nearly one of the most absolute protections on freedom of speech, even freedom of erroneous speech. And her argument would be, I believe it, therefore I have a right to say it.
That's scary.
She was a QAnon, supporter when, before she ran for Congress, and then she started muting that a bit. But before, she came while she was running her first congressional campaign. She described the Q as a patriot. So
Well, just the other night, I heard her say, and I'm paraphrasing here. She essentially said with a straight face something along the lines of, as long as the Democrats control the weather, we will not have fair elections, which leads me to believe that we're going to hear a lot of kicking and screaming from Donald Trump if he is voted, if voters say no to him.
He's been setting the stage for that, and he did that in 2016, and of course he did it again in 2020, and he attempted to execute in 2020 an abrogation of the free and fair vote of the American public. He engaged. I mean, that's what the January 5th. That's the center point of the January 5th trial that he is under indictment for, which is that he basically engaged in fraud to try and compel Republicans to advance slate of electors in Nevada, in Michigan, and in Arizona in an attempt to overturn the election.
What in the world is going to happen when we hear Donald Trump say, and he will say it if he's defeated, that the whole thing was rigged? What will happen to this country?
There's going to be severe political instability for a very simple reason, and that is that up to 1/3 of the American public is deeply in the grip of an alternative reality. They have been fed and willfully believe whatever it is that some of the news organizations have been saying, and I'll name them: Fox News, Newsmax, the Sinclair Corporation that controls large swaths of local news. They portray the news from an ideologically conservative perspective, and in many instances they are willing enablers of a lot of disinformation.
And in many cases, it seems to go beyond conservative.
Yeah.
Because now we have poll workers who are saying, what do we do when armed people show up and come in and they're going to stand around and watch us and make sure what we do is right and accurate? How will they know? Beg is the question that's first, you're going to beg, but is there a law to keep armed intruders out?
There should be. And in fact, something similar happened again in Ohio, where a local sheriff demonstrated that he was going to be a partisan on social media. And the Department of Justice has basically said that they will be observing the elections in the precincts where that sheriff is basically has jurisdiction. So it's supposed to work that way, but again, there are how many different voting precincts in the United States? There are over 4,000 counties alone, and so there are multiple precincts in many of those areas, and so you're talking about thousands and thousands of polling areas, and I think that there is a determined effort afoot to suppress the vote.
If in fact I'm hearing you correctly, that means that a poll worker or one who is responsible for counting the votes encounters armed men that just present themselves for whatever reason. There's no way they can.
Well, I would say this. The Department of Homeland Security, I believe, has designated election infrastructure as a critical infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And that means that there should be, if armed people show up at a polling place, they should be able to call local law enforcement who will come and interdict them. It is against the law to come armed to a polling place and attempt to intimidate voters. And so both parties are supposed to be able to present poll watchers, but they're supposed to be designated, they're supposed to be approved. And so, the problem is, if you've got literally, militia people who have no, chain of command just spontaneously showing up, that would on its face be a crime, frankly.
We have less than 4 minutes. Donald Trump refers to January 6th as a love fest.
Yeah,
It broke my heart to see what happened.
absolutely.
He says one person was killed,
No.
and yet we saw with our own eyes the truth of what was happening
Yeah. Over 144 police officers were wounded
severely.
in that process. Two people, one died of a heart attack. Another person was trampled. Another one of his supporters was shot by law enforcement because she was attempting to pierce, attempting to force entry into a very sensitive area, which would have given a mob access to dozens of members of Congress. There were several police officers. One died of a stroke, apparently. Another one committed suicide as a result of the trauma resulting from that day. So it was not this love fest that he claims.
And there were
and again, I think the word that is being bandied about quite a bit is the idea that he is attempting to sane wash this. He is somehow attempting to force people to believe something other than what their eyes showed them.
Well, I distinctly heard the remark, "Go for the eyes, go for the eyes," and they were using bear
Get his
spray
gun.
and hairspray and everything else on the eyes of the police officers that were there to do their job. And the Capitol Police were calling for help and couldn't get it.
Yeah. Again, in part because everyone was terrified of the National Guard and what would happen if Donald Trump called and ordered them to do something other than disperse the crowd.
I had not thought of that.
Yeah,
That's a very serious, scary picture.
absolutely.
We got about 2 minutes. Where are we going from here?
This is a turnout election. You're not going to be able to change minds. There are no undecided voters. They claim that they're undecided, but in many instances, I just think they're reluctant to say who they're going to vote for to pollsters. I suspect, again, it's a matter of, what are people responding to on Election Day? If more people walk in the polling booth that care more about immigration than anything else, then Donald Trump has an excellent chance of winning. If turnout is lower than 65%, Donald Trump has an excellent chance of winning. If more people walk into the polling booth that care about abortion than anything else, then Kamala Harris has an excellent chance of winning. If more than 66% of the electorate turns out, then again, she has an excellent chance of winning.
You're painting a picture there that makes me go, oh, please, show up this side,
Absolutely, absolutely.
because the alternative is frightening.
It is. I mean, I'm a political scientist because I believe government can be a force for good. And I shudder to think at what would happen if Donald Trump is given a second term. I don't believe he's capable of competent governance.
All of the generals, everybody who was around him when January 6th took place are saying he's dangerous.
And yet, the people who watch Fox News and conservative media have a totally different understanding of January 6th and really don't get the information because they don't bring those former generals on to ask them what they think about Donald Trump.
Well, the other night when Kamala Harris was on Fox, she couldn't get a word in edgewise because they kept cutting her off.
Yeah, and they ambiguously cut a video clip of Donald Trump talking about the enemy from within as if it was innocuous. It was a very disingenuous cut, and frankly, I mean, it violated basic norms of professional journalism.
As the song goes, the times, they are changing. Dr. Hicks, thank you. You'll never know how grateful I am to have you here. And I got to ask you point blank, will you come back after the election?
Happy to, yes.
I'll keep the chair warm for you. Thank you, my friend. We're all out of time. Thank you for being a part of it. And please register if you have. Well, it may be too late to register to vote. I think so, but get out there and vote. And please give some thought to how you cast your vote. It's so critically important to this country. We'll see you next time on Perspective.